Hi, my name is Ankita. I'm from India. Professionally, I'm an architect. And right now, I'm in Melbourne studying Masters of Urban Design from UniMelb. When I was younger, I remember having a very good observation skills. Like whenever I used to travel, I used to observe things, remember things, and I would actually see that like there's a relationship between the built environment and how human behaves in it, and like how they are interacting in that built environment. So I really liked that relationship, and that's how I went into the architecture field, and then eventually obviously it's design. So yeah, so finally then in urban design. Like in any field of design, it's always human centric. You can see fashion design, you can see product design, architecture, built environment design, everything is about human. It is about understanding like how human behavior and what kind of lifestyle they would like to do, and actually just always about like what's the human approach towards it. So that's basically the pure essence of design. So I think like in India, design is very different. Like, so the design meaning, everything changes where the context, people changes. So I feel like culturally India is different from different western any country. As a matter of fact, like I would say each and every place has its own context, has its own history, has its own culture, social structures. So it's very different from here, I would say that. So yeah, it's but then that's the quality of a very good designer or architect or any designer, to adapt according to the client or the person you're designing for. So that's the basic essence of everything. Understanding human behavior, having understanding of everything which matters to that area or anything.
Ankita has been my roommate for about 3 months now, and although we come from completely different walks of lives, cultures, and have quite a few years between us, I think we found a lot of common ground in our passions. I've never really thought too intricately about how things are designed, but as we got to know each other, often through brief passing bys in our kitchen, I realised that media and urban design actually possess similar conceptual ideas. In particular, the idea of observation. Ankita has told me about her fieldwork, where she would go and monitor people and how they interact with spaces. And as a filmmaker, I think we do this subconsciously all the time, with obviously a different medium as the result. And you might be wondering why I'm mentioning all this, but I think this concept of observation was really the essence of my video portrait. So, if I had to pinpoint a most successful singular aspect, it would be the observational documentary style I employed during the creative process. This meant not only observing my subject and the way she talks about what design means to her, but also the essence of the design around me, and in particular how the people of Melbourne interact with the city. I like the sense of realism in both her responses and the long take B-roll I chose to accompany them. And although I think the overall product isn't purely an observational documentary, I thought the way I took elements of this style and combined them with more personal storytelling created a unique angle on the task. However, I think compared to some past examples of students' work, my approach to telling Ankita's story was one of the most problematic aspects as well. Although this task was broad, it was about the portrait of a person and their story. And I think my end result lacked a strong narrative or personal journey with a 5-act structure, which I knew was kind of the expectation going in. But for me, thematically, this just didn't make sense. In particular, I felt that it would be misguided ethically as a filmmaker to force a story upon my subject, whether that be in production or post-production, that wasn't really there. But at the same time, I think my documentary is more conceptual rather than emotionally moving, and I think that's definitely a problematic aspect. Aside from storytelling aspects, I made a key learning discovery about the idea of composition and depth, in particular the creative possibilities they can have when producing video portraits such as this. In one of the set readings, Bobke claims the success of an entire film often depends on the filmmaker's eye for composition. And in the production of this portrait, I discovered that this was not as hyperbolic as it sounds. I found that there were more ways of thinking about composition that I had actually realised. For example, by placing Ankita off-centre in her interview, it added to the observational style of the documentary, almost like we were observing someone's passions from a distance, or even as Bobke reinforces, how having subjects that move across the frame in the foreground of my B-roll act as their own portraits within the overall video portrait. as opposed to the detached quality of wide shots with subjects moving off-center to the frame in a time-lapse that I also chose to include. Playing around with the combinations of these different compositions helped me understand how crucial framing and depth can be in storytelling, especially in something as deceptively simple as a video portrait. I think it's worth stating at this point, I've been talking a lot about conceptual ideas and the theoretics of filmmaking and storytelling, but I also learned practical skills throughout this project too. For example, I learned a core lesson about animation. I haven't really experimented with animation before I started making these vlogs, and that's mostly because of two things. One, I cannot draw to save my life. And two, often my focus is on non-fiction based media, meaning I don't really have any intention of becoming the next Miyazaki or Walt Disney. But when I got to the editing process, I wanted to add layers of depth in my B-roll, and I came to realize that animation can be useful even in a video portrait, non-fiction kind of context. So with the help of a few YouTube tutorials, I taught myself how to do some very simple animations in DaVinci Resolve, and I was actually really happy with how they turned out. So in terms of my broader development, I think I've learned a lot about not being afraid to mix mediums and styles, because what you can end up with can actually be pretty engaging and creative, and that matters just even on a practical level. Anyways, that is the end of my reflection, so I will see you next week in the next vlog.